Great news for the Second Amendment. Just a few hours before the ATF's tyrannical new rule was scheduled to go into effect, Gun Owners of America and Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton won a temporary restraining order, or TRO, against the ATF in federal court. Hey guys, I'm Phil, and you're watching Law and Ammo. On today's first episode of Law and Ammo, we're going to talk about the massive gun win that GOA just scored for our gun owners. But before we tell you all how brutally Judge Kaczmarek eviscerated the ATF, I do want to take a moment and explain what the GOA team did to lead up to this incredible moment. This fight really began back in 2022, when our team of lobbyists tried to stop Congress from passing the bipartisan Safer Communities Act. Our team fought tooth and nail, but instead, Senator John Cornyn convinced enough rhinos to compromise the Second Amendment. And by the way, Brandon Herrera's opponent, Tony Gonzalez, voted for this trash. The bill tweaked the definition of a gun dealer by only a few words, but that was just enough for President Biden to weaponize it against us. And tragically, GOA warned Congress that this would happen, writing, "Expanding the definition of FFLs could require anyone who sells more than one gun to do so through an FFL, resulting in a backdoor mechanism for universal background registration checks, just as the Obama administration attempted." And that's exactly what President Biden decided to do. He mimicked an old, dead executive order from President Obama's last day in office and used Senator Cornyn's definition as an excuse to implement backdoor universal background checks. And if you think I'm kidding, the White House literally said the quiet part out loud. On the White House website, it says, in 2023, President Biden signed an executive order to accelerate the implementation of the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, including by directing the Attorney General to move the U.S. as close to universal background checks as possible without additional legislation by clarifying the new act. So the ATF dropped this absurd new gun control rule called engaged in the business as a dealer in firearms. GOA commented, and so did 85,000 of you, our members. And as Tiffany noted in One in the Chamber, ATF had to change the final rule in over 40 different ways because of the flaws we all pointed out. But when the final rule came out, it was still a load of garbage. ATF maintained their position that you might need a license to even offer to sell a single firearm to even your family members. That is clearly not what's written in the law. And the ATF was still going to presume you guilty of civil violations and instruct juries to make permissive inferences that you were guilty in a criminal court. What's a permissive inference? Well, typically only used in civil court, ATF now wants to use it for criminal violations. Essentially, the jury is told to infer that you're guilty on ATF's instructions. Well, this could be that you sold 3 guns with sequential serial numbers, and the ATF assumes that you're engaged in the business, and they will instruct the jury to make a permissive inference. And we found dozens of ways that you could be presumed guilty of a crime, even though your actions would be totally legal in the end. And we knew we had to file a lawsuit, but there just wasn't a lot of time. The final rule was published on April 20th, and that was scheduled to go into effect only 30 days later, on May 20th. So we quickly got together with the best attorneys general in the country and came up with a plan. We were going to file a few lawsuits across the country. Our strategy? Total victory in each court, or at least a circuit court split to help get the Supreme Court to weigh in. And so that's when we all did a joint press conference to announce this lawsuit.
If there's a middle ground, it should be controlled by Congress. The ATF, as far as I know, is not in the Constitution. I haven't found it anywhere in the Constitution. And so there's a process. It's called elected representatives. They make the changes. It's not up to Joe Biden to just issue an edict through the ATF that controls the sale of guns. If there needs to be a change, that needs to be addressed by Congress.
So the Florida Attorney General filed in the Middle District of Florida, and they were assigned Judge Charlene Edwards Honeywell, an Obama appointee. Attorney General Chris Kobach and a bunch of other attorneys general filed suit in Arkansas's Eastern District and were also assigned an Obama-appointed judge, James M. Moody Jr. It was up to us to get a good judge and a good ruling, so GOA and the Gun Owners Foundation filed our lawsuit alongside Texas, Utah, Mississippi, and Louisiana, as well as the Tennessee Firearms Association and the Virginia Citizens Defense League. And we got an awesome judge in the Northern District of Texas, Judge Kaczmarek. He ordered an expedited briefing schedule, which had our attorneys Rob Olson, Stephen Stambouli, and the whole team pulling several all-nighters to go toe-to-toe with the ATF and DOJ's army of bureaucrats. It ended with oral arguments the week before the rule was supposed to go into effect. Stephen absolutely crushed it in the oral arguments. One thing he was able to tell the judge was actually how Congress was mobilizing against this new ATF rule. This is something all of you pro-gun activists watching need to help us encourage, as your phone calls can move members of Congress to take action. This helps us show the court that Congress thinks ATF has gone way too far in interpreting congressional will. Basically, Representative Andrew Clyde and Senator John Cornyn had introduced joint resolutions of disapproval to strike down this rule. Andrew Clyde was the congressman who also led the fight against the Biden pistol ban. And yes, we know how ironic it is that Senator Cornyn is leading the Senate disapproval resolution, as he's a major reason this rule exists in the first place. But these aren't just strongly worded resolutions. The Congressional Review Act, or CRA, has real power. If they were to become law, then the ATF rule is reversed, and the ATF can't issue a similar rule either. And for everyone saying that it could never become law, there's a special process where we can try to force votes on the CRA, even in the democratically controlled Senate. If you can pick up the phone and call 202-224-3121 and tell your elected representatives to support HJ Res 144 and SJ Res 83. Anyway, back in the courtroom, our attorneys were able to tell the judge all about how the author of the gun control compromise didn't mean to enact backdoor UBCs, and mention how Congress was getting ready to vote to reverse the rule. And as it turned out, that was a compelling argument for the judge to hear. We ended our arguments by asking the judge to issue a nationwide order that would restrain the ATF from enforcing this made-up gun control. And with that, the hearing ended and we nervously awaited a decision from the judge, which he indicated he wanted to make before the effective date. Then, only 4 hours before the rule was slated to go into effect on Sunday night, the judge let the ATF have it. Judge Kaczmarek issued a temporary restraining order preventing the ATF from enforcing its new definition of engaged in the business as a dealer in firearms. The protections were officially limited to Texas and GOA members, as well as members of the Tennessee Firearms Association and Virginia Citizens Defense League. Also, this TRO extends only until June 2nd. For now, rest assured that GOA will be asking the court to renew it on June 2nd. It's worth noting as well that the ATF may appeal this decision. Now, GOA members will be able to exercise their right to buy and sell firearms in private sales without infringement by this new rule. And while the ruling doesn't apply to everyone, enforcement of the rule would be a nightmare for the ATF, who must now discern if an individual is a Texan or a GOA or a VCDL or TFA member before enforcing the new rule against somebody. So what did the judge say about the ATF's rule? Judge Kaczmarek's decision means he believes GOA is likely to succeed on the merits of our case that the ATF's rule is likely illegal. The judge noted 4 major faults with ATF's rule in this TRO. Let's dive in. First off, he says that the ATF falsely asserts that there is no minimum number of firearms to actually be sold to be engaged in the business for the purposes of a licensing requirement. A single firearm transaction, or even a mere offer to engage in a transaction, may suffice. Secondly, the judge ruled that the ATF falsely suggested that actual profit is not a requirement of the statute. It is only the predominant intent to earn a profit through the repetitive purchase and resale of firearms that's required. In other words, a person may repeatedly advertise and display firearms for sale, and therefore demonstrate a predominant intent to earn a profit from repeatedly reselling the firearms purchased, but never actually find a buyer. Thirdly, the judge said that ATF's new rule arbitrarily eviscerates Section 921A, 21C's safe harbor provision. Nothing in the foregoing text suggests that the term personal collection does not include firearms accumulated primarily for personal protection. Yet, that is exactly what the final rule asserts. And the judge finally also agreed with GOA on perhaps the worst part of the rule, condemning ATF for flipping the statute on its head by requiring that firearm owners prove innocence rather than the government prove guilt. The judge recognized that ATF created new gun control out of thin air because they were ordered by the Biden administration and their anti-gun billionaire donors. He correctly recognized that the rule literally made gun owners guilty until proven innocent. The judge also characterized the ATF's legal briefings as, just trust us. Thankfully, the judge did not leave gun owners at the mercy of Biden's tyrannical ATF. While we continue to fight to uphold this ruling in federal court, the next question is, will Congress? Congress cannot let this limited injunction by a federal judge be the final say on this ATF rule. It shouldn't be up to gun owners of America and the court system to save the American people from this tyranny. Gun owners shouldn't have more freedoms just because they pay membership dues to an organization that files lawsuits. Congress must halt this rule from affecting gun owners nationwide. Weak Republicans got gun owners into this mess by passing the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act and unnecessarily changing the definition of what it means to be a gun dealer. Now, Congress needs to use its oversight to block the rule and cut back funding from these rogue agencies. Even GOA ally Congressman Chip Roy just said, Congress shouldn't leave defending your rights solely to the courts. So what I'm asking you to do is call 202-224-3121 and tell your congressman that you support HJ Res 144 and SJ Res 83. And stay tuned for future updates on this lawsuit. I'm Phil, and this has been Law and Ammo.